Hey, Jesus followers, welcome to Daily Bread. We are in Acts 23 today, and we're going to jump right into it here, starting out with verse 1. Remember that this is where Paul is being interviewed by the religious leaders. He is they've really been trying to kill him, but he's being interviewed here. And so let's get right into it. Gazing intently at the high council, Paul began, "Brothers, I have always lived before God with a clear conscience." Look at this. Instantly, Ananias, the high priest, commanded those close to Paul to slap him on the mouth. But Paul said to him, "God will slap you, you current hypocrite." It's a little testy to start this out, okay? Then he says, "What kind of judge are you to break the law yourself by ordering me to be struck like that?" Those standing near Paul said to him, "Do you dare insult God's high priest?" Then Paul actually responds in humility. He says, "I'm sorry, brothers. I didn't realize he was the high priest." Paul replied, "For the scriptures say, you must not speak evil of any of your rulers." Verse 6, Paul realized that some of the members of the high council were Sadducees and some Pharisees. So he shouted, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, as were my ancestors, and I am on trial because my hope is in the resurrection of the dead." This divided the council, the Pharisees against the Sadducees, for the Sadducees say there is no resurrection or angels or spirits, but the Pharisees believe in all of these. So there was a great uproar. Some of the teachers of religious law, who were Pharisees, jumped up and began to argue forcefully. "We see nothing wrong with him," they shouted. "Perhaps a spirit or angel spoke to him." As the conflict grew more violent, the commander was afraid they would tear Paul apart. So he ordered his soldiers to go and rescue him by force and take him back to the fortress. That night, the Lord appeared to Paul and said, "Be encouraged, Paul. Just as you have been a witness to me here in Jerusalem, you must preach the good news in Rome as well." So Paul really uses this clever trick here. He realizes that there's two different groups of people here, Pharisees, Sadducees, and they have a dispute about the fact that one, the Savior is going to resurrect from the dead, and angels and spirits, and so they have these doctrinal beliefs. And so he basically sides with one of them, which is the one that he was. And he's like, "Hey, I'm a Pharisee." And they start arguing, and he basically gets removed from this entire process. So the Holy Spirit, I believe, gave him the wisdom here to do this, to get out of this situation. And the Holy Spirit gives us wisdom to be wise and to be clever as well. But notice here in verse 11, God speaks to Paul and says, "Hey, be encouraged. You're going to preach here." So basically he says, you have an assignment. You're not going to be killed. You're not going to be destroyed. And this is why it's important to know our assignment, guys. When we follow Jesus, we have to know what our assignment is, because different challenges and troubles will not deter us if we realize that doesn't even matter. I'm on assignment. So important and very important thing to know what our assignment is from Jesus. Verse 12, the next morning a group of Jews got together and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they killed Paul. Dude, these people were intense. They were more than 40 of them in this conspiracy. They went to the leading priests and elders and told them, "We have bound ourselves with an oath to eat nothing until we have killed Paul. So you and the high council should ask the commander to bring Paul back to the council again. Pretend you want to examine his case more fully, and we will kill him on the way." But Paul's nephew, his sister's son, heard of the plan and went to the fortress and told Paul. Paul called for one of the Roman officers and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something important to tell him." So the officer did, explaining, "Paul the prisoner called me over and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." The commander took his hand, led him aside, and said, "What is it you want me to tell me?" Paul's nephew told him, "Some Jews are going to ask you to bring Paul before the high council tomorrow, pretending they want to get some more information, but don't do it. There are more than 40 men hiding along the way ready to ambush him. They have vowed not to eat or drink anything until they have killed him. They are ready now, just waiting for your consent. Don't let anyone know you told me this," the commander warned the young man. So notice here at the end of this little section that there's a plan for people to literally not eat in order to kill Paul. But it just so happens that the right person at the right time was there to hear it, and the plan gets thwarted. And this is what I believe that Jesus does for us, is that when undue plans to harm us are in place, that he will lead us around it. So let's keep going on here. Verse 23. Then the commander called 2 of his officers and ordered, "Get 200 soldiers ready to leave for Caesarea at 9 o'clock tonight. Also take 200 spearmen and 70 mounted troops. Provide horses for Paul to ride and get him safely to Governor Felix." Then he wrote this letter to the governor. "From Claudius Lysias to his Excellency, Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by some Jews and they were about to kill him when I arrived with the troops. Then I learned that he was a Roman citizen. I removed him to safety. Then I took him to their high council to try to learn the basis of accusations against him. I soon discovered the charge was something regarding their religious law, certainly nothing worthy of imprisonment or death. But when I was informed of a plot to kill him, I immediately sent him to you. I have told his accusers to bring their charges before you." So that night, as ordered, the soldiers took Paul as far as Antipatris. They returned to the fortress the next morning, and while the mounted troops took him on to Caesarea. When they arrived in Caesarea, they presented Paul and the letter to Governor Felix. He read it and then asked Paul what province he was from. "Cilicia," Paul answered. "I will hear your case myself when your accusers arrive." The governor told him. Then the governor ordered him kept in the prison at Herod's headquarters. So again, here we see the plan to kill Paul was totally thwarted. That God told Paul, remember, he told him, even at the beginning of this chapter, don't worry, you have to preach the good news in Rome, so you won't be killed. And I just want to show that there's an orchestration of the plan of God in Paul's life here. And sometimes we don't necessarily see what's going on, and we feel like maybe different chess pieces are moving in this thing, but you have to know that God has a great plan for your life, and he will orchestrate it. He is the orchestrator of the plan of our lives, and we have to trust him with it. Paul was in a place where he had to trust God. He was a prisoner. There was really not much that he could do. And God led him through even these crazy challenges here. And so even for our own lives as we follow Jesus, notice and remember, be comforted that God is working on his plan for your life on your behalf, and he only has good intentions for you. Again, this is Daily Bread, and we're so glad you guys joined us. That was Acts 23. Let's keep following Jesus together.